Stop scrolling. Seriously, stop. Because what I'm about to tell you is not another "Ukraine blew something up" headline. And if you watch this video and take nothing else away, take this one sentence with you. Most military channels are covering the wrong story right now. On May 23rd, Ukraine hit the Tambov Gunpowder Plant. You've probably seen the footage. Big fire, mushroom cloud, people cheering, and yes, that happened. But the explosion is not the story. The aftermath is. Because a gunpowder factory is not a fuel depot. It is not an airfield. It is not an ammunition storage site. It is something much more dangerous to lose. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why Russia just took a wound that will not heal for years. Not months. Years. This is war conflict. We do three things on this channel. We give you the facts, we give you the strategy underneath the facts, and we never, ever lie to you about where this war is actually going. Today we're covering the Tambov strike in three parts. First, what actually got hit and why most news outlets got the target wrong. Second, why gunpowder is the hidden bottleneck in every single war, and why Russia cannot replace what it just lost. Third, what Putin's military runs out of first, and when that happens. Let's start with what happened on May 23rd. May 23rd, 2026, approximately 2 a.m. local time, the Tambov Gunpowder Plant, located in the town of Kotovsk. That's about 300 miles southeast of Moscow, 500 kilometers inside Russian territory. And just to be clear about the distance here, that is not a border strike. That is not a hit the supply truck just inside Russian lines operation. That is deep. That is strategic. That is Ukraine telling Moscow that no part of Russia is safe. According to Ukraine's SBU, the Security Service of Ukraine, which has been running the long-range drone campaign, the operation involved at least 3 waves of drones. The first wave hit the perimeter defenses, anti-aircraft positions, radar installations. The second wave hit the production buildings themselves, and the third wave targeted the storage bunkers. Here's what satellite imagery confirmed over the following 48 hours. At least 4 separate buildings sustained significant damage. The main mixing facility, where raw chemicals are combined into gunpowder slurry, is completely destroyed. The drying room, where the gunpowder is baked into its final form, is still smoking 3 days later. And 2 storage bunkers collapsed after secondary explosions that lasted over 2 hours. Now, I want you to think about what secondary explosions for 2 hours actually means. That is not fuel burning. Fuel burns fast and hot. That is propellant cooking off. Each explosion you see in those videos represents hundreds, maybe thousands of artillery shells worth of gunpowder being destroyed in seconds. Russian Telegram channels, and I monitor several of them daily, confirm the scale of the damage. One channel, run by a former Tambov employee, wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here, "The plant is not damaged. The plant is gone. What is still standing will have to be demolished." But here is where most coverage got it completely wrong. Every mainstream outlet called this another ammunition depot. CNN said, Russian ammo storage hit. BBC called it explosions at a military facility. Even some of the bigger YouTube channels just showed the fire and moved on. That is lazy, and it is dangerous. Because a gunpowder plant is not a storage depot. A storage depot holds finished shells. Bad to lose, yes, but replaceable. A gunpowder plant makes the propellant that goes inside those shells. You cannot make shells without it. And there are only 3 major gunpowder plants in all of Russia. Tambov was one of them. Think about the difference this way. If you destroy a bakery, people go hungry that day. If you destroy the wheat field, people go hungry for a year. Tambov was the wheat field. And here's the emotional anchor that I need you to hold on to. Every Russian shell that has hit a Ukrainian school, every rocket that has leveled an apartment building in Kharkiv, every artillery round that has torn through an evacuation convoy in Donetsk Oblast, a percentage of that propellant came from Tambov. Not all of it, but a significant percentage. And now, that factory is gone. The workers are scattered, the machinery is melted, the chemical stockpiles are burned. Ukraine did not just hit a target. Ukraine reached into the heart of Russia's weapons manufacturing system and told the Kremlin, "We are not just fighting your soldiers at the front, we are dismantling your ability to resupply them at all." But here's what no one is talking about. Stick with me. Because the real story is not the fire. It is not the satellite images. It is not even the factory. The real story is what Russia cannot replace. And that story is much, much worse for Putin than any headline you have read. Most coverage stops at Ukraine destroyed a factory. Here is the layer underneath. To understand why Tambov matters, you have to understand how artillery actually works. Not the Hollywood version, the real version. An artillery shell has 5 main components: the casing, that is the metal tube, the high explosive filler, TNT or something similar, the fuse, which tells the shell when to explode, the primer, which ignites the propellant, and the propellant itself, the gunpowder that launches the shell out of the barrel. Most people think the explosive filler is the hard part to make. It is not. TNT is old technology. Any country with a chemical industry can make it. The hard part, the bottleneck, is the propellant. Military-grade gunpowder is not the black powder from old Western movies. It is called smokeless powder. It is made from nitrocellulose, which is cotton or wood pulp treated with nitric and sulfuric acid. Then you add stabilizers, plasticizers, and sometimes nitroglycerin for extra energy. The manufacturing process takes weeks, not days, weeks. And here is the critical part that almost no one talks about. Gunpowder cannot be stored indefinitely. It degrades. The stabilizers break down over time. Old gunpowder becomes unstable. It can ignite spontaneously. It can misfire. It can blow up inside the barrel and kill the crew. Russia has known this for decades. That is why they kept Tambov and the other 2 major plants running constantly. Fresh propellant, fresh shells, fresh artillery advantage. Now, according to Ukrainian intelligence estimates, and I want to be clear, these are estimates, not confirmed numbers, Tambov supplied roughly 35% of Russia's total artillery propellant. Let me say that number again. 35%. That is not a rounding error. That is a critical node. That is the difference between firing 50,000 shells a day and firing 30,000 shells a day. But here is where the strategy gets really interesting. Because Russia cannot just shift Tambov's production to the other 2 plants. Those plants, one near Perm and one near Kazan, are already running at maximum capacity. You cannot just add 35% overnight. The machinery does not exist. The skilled workers do not exist. The chemical supply chains are already stretched. In fact, Russian state media admitted, accidentally, that the Perm plant has been operating with 2 shifts instead of 3 for the past 6 months because they cannot find enough qualified chemists. 2 shifts, not 3. While fighting the largest land war in Europe since 1945. That is not a war machine running smoothly. That is a war machine held together with duct tape and hope. So Russia has 3 options now. Option 1. Build a new gunpowder plant. Impossible. That takes 5 years minimum and billions of dollars. They do not have the time or the money. Option 2. Import from North Korea or Iran. They are already doing this. But North Korean gunpowder is notoriously inconsistent. Ukrainian soldiers have reported that NK-supplied shells sometimes fall 500 meters short or overshoot by a kilometer. Russian artillery crews have complained that NK propellant leaves heavy residue in the barrel, requiring cleaning after every dozen shots instead of every 100. Option 3. Slow down artillery fire. This is the only realistic option. But slower artillery fire means Ukrainian troops face less resistance. That means Ukraine can advance. That means Russia loses ground. Putin now has to choose between worse ammunition or less ammunition. Neither option wins wars. Let me breathe here for a second. I have been covering this war for over 2 years on this channel, and I will be honest with you. When I first saw the Tambov footage, I almost did not make this video. I thought, another strike, another fire. My audience has seen this before. But then I started calling people. I spoke to a retired artillery officer who served in the Soviet Army for 20 years. I asked him, how worried would you be if you lost a gunpowder plant? He laughed. Not a happy laugh, a bitter laugh. He said, and I am quoting him directly, without gunpowder, my cannon is a very expensive crowbar. That stuck with me. Because we see these massive explosions on social media and we cheer. And I cheer too. I am not neutral on this war. But we forget what those explosions represent. Every artillery shell that Russia cannot fire because of Tambov is a shell that does not hit a Ukrainian apartment building. Every rocket motor that cannot be assembled is a rocket that does not tear through a Ukrainian evacuation convoy. The families in Kharkiv, the children in Zaporizhia, the elderly in Kherson. They will never know that Tambov was the reason they survived a particular day. But they will survive. That is not a statistic. That is tens of thousands of human beings given one more morning. Okay, back to the map, because we need to talk about what comes next. So where does this go? I am going to give you 3 time horizons: short term, medium term, long term. And I want you to remember these because they are going to define the next year of this war. Short term, days to weeks. Russia will try to airlift gunpowder from other facilities. They will raid training ammunition stockpiles. They will pull propellant from shells that were scheduled for disposal. They will beg Belarus for anything they have. But these are bandages, not solutions. Expect Russian artillery fire rates to remain high for the next 30 days. They have reserves, but those reserves are finite, and every shell they fire today is a shell they cannot fire in August. Medium term, 1 to 3 months. By late summer, Russian field commanders will start receiving reduced allocations. Not a complete cutoff, but a noticeable drop. Instead of 200 shells per gun per day, maybe 150. Instead of 150, maybe 100. And here is the cascading effect that most people miss. When Russian artillery fires less, Ukrainian counter-battery radar has an easier time. Ukrainian artillery can fire more safely. Ukrainian troops can advance with less overhead cover. This is not about one factory. This is about a system. Take out the gunpowder, and the entire artillery system slows down. Take out the refineries, and the entire logistics system slows down. Take out the command centers, and the entire decision-making system slows down. Ukraine is not trying to destroy Russia in one blow. Ukraine is trying to make Russia bleed out from 1,000 cuts. Long term, 6 to 12 months. This depends on one variable. Can Western intelligence continue identifying critical nodes inside Russia? Because Tambov was not a lucky hit. It was targeted. Ukrainian drones flew 500 kilometers through Russian airspace because someone, probably a combination of Western satellites, signals intelligence, and on-the-ground sources, told them exactly which buildings to hit. If that flow continues, Russia's entire defense industrial base becomes a target set. Not just gunpowder plants, not just refineries, but bearing factories, electronics plants, optics manufacturers, wiring harness suppliers, every single component that goes into a tank, a missile, or an artillery shell. The Russian army is not being defeated on the front line, it is being starved, one factory at a time. And here is the strategic reality that keeps me up at night, in a good way. Russia cannot defend all of these targets. The country is too big. The air defense systems are too scarce. The drones are too cheap. For every Pantsir system Russia mounts on a Moscow rooftop, that is one less Pantsir protecting troops in Donetsk. Putin is playing a game of whack-a-mole with his own territory, and he is losing. Here is how you help this channel. First, share this video with one person who thinks the war is at a stalemate, because it is not. The stalemate broke the moment Ukraine started hitting what Russia cannot replace. Tambov is proof of that. Second, comment below. I want to know, do you think Russia can rebuild its gunpowder production before its artillery runs dry? Or is this the beginning of the end for Russia's artillery advantage? I read every comment. I will pin the best analysis. Third, subscribe to War Conflict if you have not already. We post every week. We do not hype. We do not lie. We give you the strategy underneath the headlines. This is War Conflict. Remember this moment. 6 months from now, when Russian artillery fire has dropped by half, someone is going to ask what changed. The answer started on May 23rd, at a gunpowder plant, 500 kilometers inside Russia. This war is not over, and neither is our coverage. See you in the next one.